you've earned your time out of life to not have to do
We'll
anything.
be live in 2 seconds.
Okay, can't let the tone proceedings get lowered.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Winning Minds show. We're a part of Women Inspiring Network, which is a platform to bring together women achievers from different walks of life to share their stories. Women Inspiring Network started during lockdown, and it's a paid forward movement. And within the few months since the lockdown, we've garnered more than 10 million views across different kinds of events, platforms, and conversations that we have curated. Winning Minds is particularly looking at women content creators, women authors, and we're trying to explore what happens inside these brilliant minds, how do they craft the stories and books that they write, and how do they work with passion and purpose to actually bring their voices, bring their vision, bring their creativity from themselves to us as readers, as viewers, as people who are consuming content in many different ways. So today I'm really excited to welcome Rama Bijapurkar. While Rama doesn't need much introduction at all in the business circles, let me still introduce her. Rama is a recognized thought leader in the space of marketing and marketing strategy. She's a leading management consultant talking about consumers, brands, markets, economies, business, and how this whole interplay of things come together for businesses, brands, and the regulators as they look at unlocking value from the markets and unlocking value from consumers across different strata, different segments of India and Bharat and the many Bharats that she speaks of. So Rama is she's also a professor of management practice at Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. She has been on the board and continues to be in the board of multiple blue chip companies. Some of them include Infosys, Axis Bank, Bharat Petroleum, NPCI, CRISIL, and so on. She has also worked with and been on the advisory board of the Competition Commission of India. She's a fellow of the MasterCard Center of Inclusive Growth at the Fletcher School of Business. And she's, most importantly for our conversation today, she's an author. She has written 4 books, and we'll talk about those 4 books today. These are We Are Like That Only, which is a book on consumer marketing, another one called A Never Before World, Tracking the Evolution of Consumer India, and Consumer in the Boardroom, Crafting Customer-Based Business Strategy. So she really looks at business strategy and marketing from many different lenses, and her years of professional experience is what has been distilled into these books. She has worked with McKinsey, she's worked with Marketing, which is now Nielsen, Mode Services, and now she runs her own consulting practice. So Rama, welcome to this show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for making me sound cooler than I actually am. Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
Wonderful to have you. So Rama, since we are really exploring this from the world of books and the books that you've authored, tell us a little bit about your personal journey, which went from business to writing business books, became a part of your journey. So what inspired you?
Okay.
And when you have to write a book.
Right. Well, first of all, I really wish I was able to write fiction and not sort of more boring business books. I think you're frozen. Can you hear me? Am I all right? Hi.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, right. Okay. No, I think Amrita had frozen in the middle. So, well, I'm in the business. The consulting business is really about getting others to put their money where your mouth is, And so you have to basically spread your mouth around. And there are many ways of doing it. So I had a column for about 14 years in the Economic Times. I had a column in a couple of other places. And I used to segment them and say, this is, I mean, it's terribly politically incorrect in today's day and age. Those days it was okay. So we would call it real men writing and bimbo writing, which basically meant stuff that was fun, that I would want to read, and stuff that you hoped your client would read, not understand, but say, maybe there's something here, I'll give you business. And then I also had a column in the Sunday Indian Express Eye when it was a broadsheet, which was fun. It was about my dog and my husband and my child and everything. That column stopped because they said to me that they wanted royalty or pre-clearance. That's the family, which I wasn't going to do. So as far as the business books are concerned, they are in a sense a summation of the work that I do. So if I have been looking at consumer India for a while when liberalization happened and addressed a lot of boards of a lot of Fortune companies, a lot of investor conferences, and I used to get very upset by the fact that the bigger consulting firms were putting out a narrative that I completely disagreed with. And I thought, you know, let's really take them on. And so that's really how the first one was born. It was called We're Like That Only, which, as I gleefully told everybody in Indian English, meant it is what it is, now just deal with it and don't complain. And so similarly, once I had that space and that book did very well, I then felt it was time to review it again. So I did the second one. And my customer in the boardroom was the sum total of a lot of teaching. And I decided I didn't really want to teach that course at Ahmedabad anymore. So I dedicated it to my teacher who I teach with, and I actually put it in a book. Needless to say, he's a tough teacher, even for me at this age. So he said, Rama Ben, karna hi padega. So now we use that book as a textbook. So it's really, I think, born out of past material and born out of a need to maybe prove a point, maybe distill. I mean, if I were to put it from a marketing or career point of view, I think to be able to throw your body over the space and say, you know what, this is my space and this is my view. And anybody wants, it's like laying down a gauntlet and saying, I own the space. I mean, it's probably all the wrong reasons, but there it is.
You know, I mean, like, it's your space, your voice, your view of your way of viewing the world, which you of it, like, you know, it's quite intertwined, right? Like, you know, this whole process of writing and being a consultant and the two personas. What advantage did, like, you know, writing a book give you in your professional journey, which might be of interest to some of our listeners today as they navigate their own professional journeys? And many of, like, you know, oftentimes people have it in their minds that I want to write a book. So what do you think, like, you know, is the benefit of writing a business book like the ones that you've written?
I think it's a good way. It applies both to, I think, just generally writing columns in newspapers that end up in a, you know, a book is a mega version of the regular columns that you do. I think what it does is it gives you your point of view. It gives people a definitive point of view where you're coming from and what you stand for. So you get a chance to shape that space. And when you shape that space, I think you get identified with that space. And so even in my professional, my consulting journey, I have a simple metric. If the world of customers is being discussed anywhere by the government, by my neighbor, by businesses, do I get invited to the table on my own? And if that is the metric, then I think if you have books that laid out clearly in terms of what your thinking is, different, same, why it is so, then you automatically end up getting that seat at the table. It does also, I think, in some ways, help you raise your consulting rates a little bit. Now the kind of stuff I write about is not exactly in the space I consult in, but even then there are some synergies. So I think it gives you, it gives the inside of your head a fairly definitive positioning in the eyes of other people. That is always good. But generally, I think writing helps because, I mean, certainly, if there's something that I really want to discuss with somebody, I think if I write about it in a leading paper, that somebody is more likely to read it and then will certainly call and say, you know, I totally disagree with you. This is rubbish. I agree with you. Would you like to come for a discussion? It's so much nicer than you calling and saying, can I come for a discussion? Please, can I meet you? Also, if you circulate something with a masthead or with a book, I think it's a little nicer than circulating a mail saying, hey, this is what I think. Do you want to listen to me? So it helps marketing. I mean, just helps. It helps you get the visibility that you need.
No, I mean, like, I couldn't agree more with you in that, that like, it really opens the doors in many ways. So talk to us a little bit about, the moment, you said that you were always writing columns, but a book effort that you dedicate to, the process of writing and structuring and editing and taking it to market. And many professionals, are interested in the idea of writing a book, but it remains a dream, it remains a vision. Immediacy takes over. How did you find the time? How did you create the time? How did you manage the different pressures?
This immediacy taking over is true. Everyone said to me, oh, you must be really busy in the lockdown doing your books, and I want to write new stuff. And I said, no, I'm spending all my time doing Battan Jhadu Pocha. I'm spending my time watching Netflix. I mean, I'm doing everything except writing. I now understand that whether you are free or whether you're busy, there doesn't seem to be a natural space. Having said that, my teacher and guru, C.K. Prahlad, said to me that he wrote Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid in 12 days flat from one end to the other, and he'd write every day. And I was like, oh gosh, that's because you have a wife, maybe. I mean, you didn't have to do any of this stuff. But then now, because I am recently widowed, I am single, but I don't think not having anyone in the house is helping either. So basically, it's tough going. My books are written 20 minutes in an airport lounge, 40 minutes wherever you can make time. When the editor says he or she is coming into Bombay and what have you done, then very quickly a chapter shows up from somewhere. So it's very disjointed, disoriented. But what I try and do consciously is, like, for example, I agree to a lot more speaking engagements around my subject, because that's what I call for a forcing device. So you pick a topic you really should be writing or thinking about, and then you put a stretch target to it, and you agree to say it in a venue where you will have egg in your face if you don't do it right. And it's just surprising how at the end of the day, something new does get developed. So it's, I think the process of putting material content points of view together continues. You have to weave it into your everyday life, and you have to write it wherever you can, my mother's dining table, whatever. And then if you feel that there is a sell-by date to your ideas, then I think it does light a fuse under you to say, I want to get there first. So yeah, it's very disjointed. So I start with the publisher. I start with saying, I really want to write this book. Are you going to publish me? And then they say, okay, I mean, what's it about? And then that forces you to go and write an outline. And then when they say, can you write 3 sentences about why this is important? It forces you to think a little more. So every step somebody's pushing you, you just have a little more clarity around it. And truth be told, that's what it is.
No, that's fantastic to know. So there's a lot of different threads in there that we need to explore. One was about this whole organic process of writing, where you've got multiple thoughts, but ultimately it needs to be shaped and it needs to come together cohesively. And then there was this whole the process of writing, that you need to be flexible in the way you're writing, where you're writing, what time you're writing, and it's if it's part of your daily routine in some shape or form, or your DNA, then it happens. But let's talk a little bit about the shaping part of it, right? Because that's really critical. You said that you had you were already in presentations, meeting up with clients. You had certain ideas which you wanted to bring to the table, right? So from that basic kernel of an idea, right? A kernel oftentimes becomes an article. It can become a white paper. What do you need to do to ensure that the kernel has enough meat in it to become a full book? How do you define that? What's the process that you traverse?
You have to, I think, do at least a paragraph for yourself or for whoever else to say, this, I mean, that's what, for example, I've been debating in my head, that if consumer India is my space, and now I believe that we will start having more people coming and looking for foreign investment, then I'm grappling with the thought that there's a new wave of people coming in, and the questions they're asking is the same old rubbish, and I can't possibly recycle, two of them all over again. But yet it needs to be said. So I think a little bit about what's the format, what do I have new to say, and so it has to come into a why by me, and what am I saying doesn't make sense at all. So the purpose of this book is to evolve something, take something. So for example, I've been toying with a title that everybody hates. It's called The Frog Prince. You must ask everybody, and then just don't listen to your daughter, don't listen to your husband, maybe a friend that you trust. Absolutely don't listen to your publisher, and just trust that the universe will not let you go too wrong. So I want to call it The Frog Prince because I'm thinking that everybody says India has potential, and you have to kiss the frog for the frog to become the prince. But how do you know which frog you kiss, and whether it will become the prince or not? And so I want to really talk about what people don't tell you. And so from there, you start beginning to see the shape of the book. For me, it has to be provocative. It has to challenge conventional wisdom. It has to challenge that doesn't everybody know this is the way it is. And if it doesn't do that, then it's not good enough. So I'm all the time asking, what is the man bites dog? I mean, I know the dog bites man, but what is the man bites dog? The minute I get a man bites dog, so in the new one that I'm theoretically writing, I think the man bites dog is the fact that suppliers shape customers as much as customers shape suppliers. And so a book on customers has got to be a book about suppliers. I think that that's strong enough. So if I have another 2 or 3 man bites dog themes, then it gets shaped from there. So you have to say what's different. So I do often wonder about this, because when I read books that are very nice books that summarize research that other people have done, I'm always asking my publisher, why can't I do a book like that? I mean, what is the greatness of this one that makes it so lovely when it's actually just synthesizing what other people do? Why do I have to be completely original in what I do? Or why are you always asking for examples? Can I not be conceptual? And I think they tell you that there are books that inform, there are books that entertain, there are books that provoke. So what's the value space that you as a person actually are in? And then I'm fairly clear that I am in the value space of provoke, because I think in my teaching, in my consulting, if people don't think differently or challenge the way they are continuously thinking so far, then it's really not good enough. So until that happens, so the shaping comes as a counterpoint to what conventional wisdom is.
That's very interesting, that you need to be a disruptor in the idea that you're bringing to the table.
I often ask
so that there is something new, right?
Yeah. I ask myself, am I a congenital disruptor, dissenter? Is it just the need to dissent? Is it just the need to be a contrarian? Or, you have to be very careful when you do that, because you don't want to be contrarian for being contrarian. So are you a conscientious dissenter? Are you a congenital dissenter? And, let's keep the line fairly clear. So yeah, these are all the things that go through the shaping of it.
That's do you have is it amorphous? Is it all in your head? Do you have a process? Do you have wall in which you're putting together notes? Do you have a digital tool in which you put together your ideas and shuffle them around? How does it evolve?
No, I think I would have I'm a great outlines person. I think it comes from having to do 30-second elevator pitches everywhere. So I have a nut graph, so to speak, and I have a chapter design. So I say these are the 10 chapters I want to write about, and each chapter, this is the main man bites dog of this chapter, or dog bites man of this chapter, or a point of view on the chapter. That let's say I want to say COVID hasn't really disrupted. So if there was a chapter on life after COVID, my simple nut graph for that chapter would be that on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 is transformation and 1 is kutte ka dum, we're probably around 3. So then you build the argument around that. So I think the shaping comes from articles that I will write around these issues. and then those articles then begin. But yeah, I have to have an outline, which you can then depart from happily, but you have to have a framework.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah,
You know, like, yeah. And do you start out with, when you're looking at the framework, right? Like, you know, in things that you're doing, there's probably a lot of latent information that you carry from talking to
yes.
Your customers and clients, but
Yeah.
there must be also some, like, you know, active research that you do.
Yeah.
So what is the kind of research process that you have? And then the research to the framework, like, you know, what's that process like for you?
Okay, never thought about that too much. One is that I think I write everything copiously because, again, my guru and teacher who wrote the book in 12 days used to tell me, he used to say, write for your own clarity, don't write for anybody else. So you actually start writing and building that argument, and you find that, you know, why do you have to be customer centered is the question, and I never answered in an entire book on customer based business strategy outline. And you're like, oh my God, this is really, really the basis, isn't it? I really have to kind of answer that. So when you start writing it, you know the lacunae. So at least write the one page, the half a page, whatever it is. I start gathering information when I know that I'm in search mode. So whether it's my own presentation, so in the process of my own presentations, I will be doing research on the net. I will be looking at other pieces of research. I will. So right now I have a book called Lockdown Data, which I'm putting wherever came. I've created a little email for myself called book@bijapurkar.com, which is my thing. So whatever articles I'm finding interesting, in the early days, I used to clip them, and my secretary used to just have piles of them, and then we'd sort them out. And so there was one called Indian Demographics. So there was a section on women, there's a section on youth, I have a section on bottom of the pyramid, I have a section on rural, I have a file on digital, into which whatever, I mean, it could be 3 scribbles of a talk that I went to that was otherwise very boring. But when I can come back, all those things will get put together. It's like when you do accounting, you put every bill you ever have in a drawer, and then, you know, it's all there. So now, because it's an electronic world, I do a combination of things. Sometimes I just say, let's print all these and put them together, because I'm not going to go hunting for them. So it's collate them and put them together in a place. And then as you're looking through it, I think a lot of it is browsing, which is why I'm a little bit iffy about browsing electronically, because I tend to get impatient. I tend to cut and paste. I tend to pick. It goes from the keyboard to storage without going through my head. So my daughter and I often argue. She tells me it's a generational thing, and I'm like, no, wanting it to go through my head is a generational thing. Yeah. So then, if I were to sit down, if I was doing a bottom of the pyramid chapter, I would ask for the bottom of the pyramid folder, which has everything from, I don't know, 2013, and then I will start synthesizing from there. So yeah, you have to have all the material available. I found my second book, which was written well after there was a lot more data on the internet, was the hardest to do, and I don't think I did a good job of writing it as well, because I always felt that whatever I was saying, somebody else knew somewhere. I kept wanting to put footnotes to show that I was as well informed as the internet was, and it was really hard to do. So I've now sort of gotten better at that, because I'm saying if there are lots of opinions that are out there, if people are already putting opinions out, then let's gather all the opinions together and see whether I agree with the opinions or not, and not go down the data path. Depending.
Yeah. You know, talking of insights, like, you know, one of the, I guess, authors and psychologist that I admire a lot is Howard Gardner, and one of his books is 5 Minds of the Future. And one of the key traits that he defines for the next, for this century and for the next generations is a synthesizing mind, because there's a lot of information out there, and it is how we connect it together, how we process it, how we look at the the weak signals or the unconnected, weak dots, and put it together is what is important. So I completely agree with you that it needs to go through the head and then, reach somewhere. Yeah. So agree with that totally. But you started talking about the fact that, I mean, you have a blended process, of course, of putting together the information and compartmentalizing it and sort of synthesizing it as you go along. But what about the stories? How do you store them? And where do you gather the stories from? when you're looking at these stories that you're putting in the book?
So if I know that I'm in writing mode, which I think I have been, because my biggest learning actually the last 2 years was the fact that I can't write if I'm away from the buzz of the world. And that it's only when you are in the buzz that you actually pick up ideas. That actually was quite shocking to me because I thought I'm at the end of my life. I have like so much experience in my head, so all I need to do is lock myself up and write it out. But I think that wasn't working. So if you are in write mode, then it's like you turn on your antennae into full blast and you sort of fine tune them. And then you read anything, everything, listen to anybody, everybody, start picking bits and pieces. So you're looking through the lens of what you think your story may be. And so I start then reading stuff through that lens, and you start picking things up. So if someone tells me, 3 lakh new cars got registered during the lockdown period, and I'm like, really, is that so? So I will write that down somewhere called lockdown data. And then if someone says that the chairman of Maruti Udyog is going to give a talk, then I will actually go and attend that talk. So you kind of start searching. So it's antennae in full blast and read through the lens of what you think your story may be. And I think that's how the story shapes. Then you just read more, think more, learn more. It's antennae, I think. Yeah, it's antennae.
So I'm gathering.
Go for a walk all the way to Nana Chowk from where I live because I just want to know if the Bhel Puri Walas are back on the street. I don't think I would particularly care to do that if I wasn't thinking about what life after COVID for consumer India would be.
So the framework comes first, and then the story sort of integrates into that framework.
The framework is the meat of it, but the framework is the storyline, right? Because it's the nut graph of what's the overarching thing I want to say, what are the parts of it and where it comes from, and I think most important is who you're writing it for and why. If you don't have that, the rest of it is a strategy without a goal, right? So if I'm writing it for, let's say, new people who might come in, or to sort ourselves out here, or to shape a narrative somewhere, then the framework and the stories will follow from there.
Do you have an audience in mind? Because your books obviously cater to multiple sets of people, right? So it might cater to business people, it might cater to seasoned business people who are looking for disruptive ideas or new ideas. It might cater to new people in the business domain. It might cater to regulators, investors. So how do you ensure that you speak to each one of them, or do you have a primary audience in mind when you write?
I have a primary audience in mind. So first of all, I'm interested in the class market. I really couldn't care less about the mass market. So even if it's a question of where to write, I know that a certain set of people will read all 4 newspapers or will read a book that's interesting enough. So I would say, who are the 100 people that I really want to read my book? So when I wrote my first one, I said, I don't care. I will keep enough money aside to buy 100 copies of my book and gift it to people that I want to read it. And those are the people for whom I will write. And if it runs away with it and it goes, and it happens when your mother's best friend says she read it, and you're like, what the hell was she reading this for? But that's okay. It just then means that they find the story appealing. So yeah, I would write it for a very, very specific group of people. I would write it for for investors or for CEOs or for people who I think need to hear what I'm saying, or I would like them to hear what I'm saying. So I write for them, yes. I'm very, very target group driven. In fact, I get so anal that I say that in the early days, people actually bought, and I still think they do buy books, explore books at airport bookshops. They don't necessarily buy it. So I want like 100% airport bookshop distribution. My publisher gets upset because I have friends at different airports who say, oh, we saw your book, or we didn't see your book. And then I want the back flap. I'm saying, just imagine the guy who's carrying a suitcase in one hand and looking at your book in the other, and he should be able to flip it and see what it is rather than put his bag down and open it, which he may not do. So yeah, so I am thinking audience. I am thinking audience, some of whom may say, what an idiotic thing to do. Why is she saying this? So yeah, without an audience, I can't do it.
Yeah. So, from the stories that you've now crafted, do you follow a process of going through multiple edits? As you said, C.K. Prahalad wrote it one draft in 12 days and the book was out. And I've met a couple of authors who say that. Right? And
that's absolutely my benchmark.
So that can be a goal, but a lot of us actually go through the pains of going through multiple drafts. So what is your process?
Oh gosh. So first it's, what do I do? So first it's all the media, right? So I will scroll at the back of an envelope on an aircraft. If I don't have time, I will write on a nice piece of paper. There are times when I can't bear to open my keyboard. There are times when I say I'd like a brand new pen and green ink, and I will write, and then my secretary will somehow make sense of it and transfer it. There are times when I write directly on my keyboard. So all these bits and pieces of how I've written actually come together. That's the hardest part, actually. And then I do multiple drafts because once you're halfway through it, you find that something else needs to come and something. So it's fairly disorganized. But as long as the frame is in your head and you know what the frame should be, then sometimes a lot of what you've written in one place actually belongs in another. So I think good thinking is never wasted and good writing is never wasted. So even if it's exactly the wrong thing, you park it and you say, okay, I'll use it later. So yeah, it is quite agonizing because you get lost in your story. So my daughter had a question to ask me once. She said, are you having fun writing this? And I said, actually, no. And she said, imagine how much fun they're going to have reading it then. So if it isn't fun, if I'm writing it and I feel it's labored, then I put it aside and I say, I'll start all over again. So yes, it is all over again. But somehow the bits and pieces, as you know, do come together. And sometimes there's really nice stuff that you can't use. So then you say, oh, well.
Yes. I think as an author, it's very, it's heartbreaking when you have to edit yourself out. Right?
Yeah. So I'm always looking to see whether there's an appendix somewhere that can be used.
Or another article. So you mentioned, very interestingly, that your first book, when it had come out, you actually came out with two different editions at the same time, an Indian edition and a global edition. And I know, how difficult, the entire editorial process can be. You're going back and forth. You have a viewpoint, they have a viewpoint. It needs to meet somewhere. And imagine doing that same thing for a particular manuscript with two different editorial groups at the same time. So what was that process like? And were you happy with the outcome in the end?
Yeah, I was very happy with the Indian outcome, and we actually used more or less the same stuff. So I first had an international publisher, and this publisher, well, at the end of a couple of chapters, which I thought were fairly okay, the editor of the publisher came back and said, you can't read, you can't write, we're going to have to get you a ghost writer. And I don't want to do ghost writers, and so I got really upset, and I said, fine, then I'm pulling the book. And then they said, no, why don't you try some more and we'll change your editor, and maybe the chemistry with the editor is bad, maybe the editor doesn't get it. But in the meanwhile, I was so upset that after so much of writing columns and all that, they said I couldn't read, I couldn't write. So I said, to hell with you, I'll get my own publisher. So I approached one of the Indian publishers, and they were ever so sweet, and I owe them forever. And they came back in 6 hours and they said, we'll do it. And I approached them with the first chapter. And they said, and with the outline that I'd done for the other guys, and they said, we'll do it. And then my mother's always told me pretty bad advice, but it was her generation. She said, you should always marry the person who wants to marry you rather than marry the person you want to marry. So I said, okay, I absolutely want to work with the Indian publisher. They've been so nice to me. They came back. Meanwhile, the overseas guys came back as well. So then the Indian publishers were very nice. They said, look, do what's best for you. Why don't you try and negotiate for rights in the Indian subcontinent? So the overseas publisher was fine. So I said, okay, let's take the rights for the Indian thing. So I worked on the Indian content. The content was more or less similar, but the editorial comments were very different. I mean, I think I had an editor who was New Zealand Australian who would write me things that said, for the life of me, I have no understanding of what you're saying. If I was talking about an Indian kitchen or Kellogg's or why I wouldn't sell or something. So my Indian publisher gave me very good advice. He said that if you don't understand, if what they're saying isn't making sense to you and we get it and he doesn't get it, don't start taking his comments on. Just take it as an input from someone who says, I don't get you, and rewrite it a little more fully. And so that way you don't have to do something completely different and he's okay and you're okay. So the main content was done around the Indian publisher. And then we sort of worked with that content around, but it ended up with two different titles because the overseas publisher called it Winning in the Indian Market. And the Indian publisher allowed me to go with We're Like That Only. And so now I make a virtue of it. Whenever I'm talking about the book or making a presentation to a global board, I say to them that that's a Western paradigm is conquest and the Indian paradigm is surrender. And so that's why We're Like That Only is about surrender. And you can do what you want. But I wouldn't do two publishers, though they did later, they did a Chinese version and stuff like that. But I'm very happy with Indian publishers because I think uh, the process is a lot less stressful. You know, it's ghar ki baat. I mean, it's not that the others wouldn't do a terrific job, but you know, the agent and the shopping and the this and the that. And it's just been my experience from the first book that somehow books travel because it was not available overseas, but it traveled. And it traveled quite it really traveled before, you know, it was on Amazon or anything. Secondhand copies came on Amazon, though my overseas publisher had said, I will sue you if I find a single copy outside, but I didn't do it. So I think good books travel. So, and now with Amazon, you can list it and take it from there. So yeah. So, but I do different publishers for different kinds of books. I stay with the same. So if it's a more academic book, then it has to be someone who has an in into every single library of a university because that's really where you want it to go. So you have to think a little bit about that. I've lost you, I think, Amrita. Is it my connection?
I think she's stuck.
She's stuck. Okay,
we wait for her to join back.
Sure, absolutely. No problem.
Rama, my apologies. I think there was something gone wrong with the internet at my end.
No worries.
Yeah. I think it's one of the perils of doing a lot of
I was wondering
at the moment.
This happened to me yesterday.
Yeah,
no worries. Right.
It's been patchy since the morning. So I think we were talking about the fact that business has such a context to it, and economy and consumers, there's such a strong context to it that you're translating it for a global viewpoint, an outside-in perspective, versus when you're looking at it from the Indian publisher's viewpoint, it's perhaps more of an inside-in view of the ecosystem, as you're in there, right? So that's that's really interesting to hear. But tell us a little bit about your the next book, which was about customer in the boardroom, right? And again, that customer centricity has been something that's been spoken about for a few decades now, right? So when you started writing this book, and you mentioned it had academic origins and it's meant to be a textbook. So how did you ensure that there was a different point of view here? Or because it's a textbook, did it not have to be as provocative as your other books? What was the premise?
No, it was based on a course that we had designed for IIM Ahmedabad, and it was a provocative course. It was called Crafting Customer-Based Business Strategy, and it basically attacked the entire stream of business strategy that came from the supply side. So it really said you can do, so the book really said you can do supply side business strategy and end up here, or you can start looking at customers and use the same frameworks that you use for strategy. But if you put a customer thread through it, then it'll look different. So the nut graph for the course, for that book, for the course, which became a book, was that if you have a patient on an operating theater, on a table, and you have all the drips that are going through the person's body, then into the drip, you put a lot of medicines, right? So I wanted to inject the customer thread into the strategy process, and that was in my head. So once that was clear, the course also was born out of that. In fact, we had a colleague who taught a course called CCCS, Core Competence and Competitive Strategy. And so we called ours CBBS, because if that was the ultimate inside out, we were going to be the ultimate outside in, and ours was called Customer-Based Business Strategy. So that's how it kind of grew out of there. And so we really so that course was built around a very strong framework of this is how you do customer-based business strategy. And so it was, and so I just took that framework and it went chapter by chapter, went through the framework, which is why, while it was interesting and readable, I think it's too boring for a broader audience. And now I feel if that is my life's work, then I have to translate it for a broader audience. If again, I have all these stretch beacons, they're never targets for me because I can't make it that. So if CK's was the stretch beacon, this one was blue ocean strategy, right? Everybody talks about blue ocean. And I was like, oh my God, I mean, it is like so readable and so sensible. And why would I not be able to sort of in that genre do it? Mm-hmm. So, but then the point was that I had already written a lot of what I already knew in this. So how was I going to write all over again? So eventually I did the fairly stupid thing of taking the rights back on this one. And I said, I've taken the rights back from my publisher who was dead against it. And I took the rights back and I said that I will now revise it and I will actually do a version that straddles both. So it's not so academic. It doesn't have a lot of thuses and therefores, which was the style of that copy editor. But of course, to your very first question, I took the rights back, but it's now 2 years and neither are the rights available for the textbook. So I'm giving anybody who wants it the PDFs and saying, just deal with it. I don't have the ability to do it. And then I hope at some point to be able to write it. I hope.
I think this whole rights management issue is something that you don't realize,
Yeah.
And today, they're trying to stitch together, multiple rights and lock, stock, and barrel, from audio rights to global rights to adaptation rights. Everything is all bundled in. Earlier, at least, they used to offer it a la carte, so to speak.
Yeah, and you just sign away all your rights. They say, "Are you going to sign away translation rights?" And you're like, "Yeah, just get the deal signed." So yeah, but then nobody ever makes money from books unless you're Chetan Bhagat or C.K. Prasad.
No, I think it's a lot of us write because of the pleasure of writing, and also for the impact that you hope to have. Now, tell me, from your work, because you sit on so many different boards, are you seeing a transition in this whole customer centric strategy at the board level that you are a part of, and how do you think that has changed in the last decade since your book? I mean, it's not been a decade, it's been about 6-7 years since the book came out. But what are you seeing the evolution path?
So I think wrote in the preface of one of them that up till about 2008 or 9, I think a lot, to preach the idea of customer centricity in shaping your business direction didn't really make sense, because we had the problem of plenty, right? 30% growth was the Hindu rate of growth. If you didn't grow at 30%, I mean, something was wrong with you. The tide was coming in really strongly. And I think that's the period of time in which India Inc. got leaner, meaner, fitter on the supply side. And I think it did extremely well in terms of modernizing and making the transition. So the good news now for people who make money off preaching to customers, or whose joy is in doing that, is that after 2008, when we had a bit of a shakeup, and now definitely after digital and after COVID, these are fairly Darwinian times. And everyone talks about a K-shaped recovery, which means the big are getting bigger. I see it on a lot of my boards. Strong companies are getting stronger. So I think now the religion of the customer. So far, customer centricity, as I have written, is like prayer. Prove to me you'll go to heaven if you're customer centric, and prove to me that you won't if you aren't. But now I think it's fairly clear that you will go to hell if you aren't customer centric, because the demand piece is shrinking. So the time has come now. And the point is that the customer centricity in outputting your strategy in the market, in translating your strategy to the market, I think was there. But the kind of customer centricity that I'm evangelizing is to read markets to even shape your business direction. So we call it the third level of marketing. It's like the third eye in my head, that you do the what of marketplace action, the how you take a strategy and implement it. But how do you read the market to actually shape your strategy, I think, is really the question. So yeah, the time has come, and I don't have a book out there, and I took back my rights, and I haven't written another one. So there we are.
It's just picking on what you said right now. There's a lot of conversation around comfort brands at the moment, and exactly what you talked about, that the bigger companies have more access and are being able to attract the customers more in these post-pandemic times, and that makes it to some extent an uneven playing field for people, right? Where they need to understand a lot more from experts like you, as to how to actually go out and win in this scenario where people are naturally gravitating towards brands that they had trust in before, and perhaps the appetite for experimentation is low. I don't know. I mean,
I would kind of say it slightly differently. I think people who have paid attention, a brand is nothing more than talking your walk, right? So people who have paid attention to their walk, people who have been true to purpose, who have continuously built decent products, who've moved with the times, who have continuously invested, who are not fair weather friends or looking at valuation, I think they're doing actually quite well. I think in these times also, people who are actually providing a need that you might want. So for example, if it's a Swiggy Genie, I mean, there's food always going from house A to house B. Now, wherever you've really actually latched onto a relevant need and where you followed the religion of business and customer well, I think you're winning. Where you are, but these are also times when people are not, you're right about comfort, and also they're not willing to stretch for more, they're willing to settle for less. So I think you have to, so companies that are flexible and nimble are doing it. Companies that are not are waiting for some new normal to emerge and going to conferences saying where will the new normal be, instead of going and worrying about their business and just getting with it. But I saw a very nice talk the other day by Professor Nirmalya Kumar at, I think now he's somewhere in the US, he used to be at LBS. And he said that all recession research has shown that you have to be counter-cyclical. So this is the time actually to bond with the customer, to build brands, to build trust, to continue the comfort feel. This is the time for mother and father brands to come and embrace you. And I think that's what the bigger companies are doing.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So, you talked about establishing your voice as an expert in a field, right? Like, okay, if this is the field, if somebody is talking of consumer brands, they need to think of you. But when you're writing multiple books in the same domain, how do you ensure that you have something new to say, right? And you raised that very point earlier on in the conversation, that as you're thinking of what you need to write now, your next book, that's at the top of your mind. You've written some things in your past two books. You need to be different. So how do you ensure, and how was, when you were writing A Never Before World, what went into the writing process at that point of time to ensure that it was different from the first one?
I'm a good consultant, and one of the things we're taught in consulting is that the headline is everything. So even the headline of your consulting, if you talk about unlocking growth potential, you might make more money than managing your sales force better. Even if it is the same thing, you do unlocking the unlocking hidden potential dash managing your sales force better, you might do better. But seriously, what a headline forces you to do is to actually get to grips with what's different. So the first one was understanding the logic of consumer India, because I wanted to provide a voice about the inside of India for all you guys from the outside you don't know. So this one was tracking the evolution. So in a sense, it was saying that, all right, 7, 8, 9, 10 years have happened, or 5 years, I forget, had happened since the first book came out. So let's track the evolution and say, is it working? Is it not working? And then I took certain parts that I hadn't explored in that book as much. I mean, that book I had talked about how multinationals always got it wrong. So if that was the alap and I had left it at that in that book, I explored that rag much more in detail in a couple of chapters and lost all my friends. I did actually, in fact, this is something I asked my editor a lot of, that do I refer to my old book and my new book? And how do I refer to the old book and the new book? And that's something I'm asking again today. So if you don't have anything new to say, I think you shouldn't be saying it. I mean, I know there are people who always seem to have new stuff to say, but for me, it doesn't work. So I even toyed with relaunching my second book, because I think I told you that it came out at a time when it sort of sank without doing too much on the impact front as compared to the first one. So I did toy with the idea of doing a little bit of a cosmetic relook of that one. And I said, if I relaunch that book like brands relaunch, will that book actually get the width? Because a lot of people would say, they'd show up with the old book to be signed, and I'd say, oh, but I've written a new one. And they'd say, we didn't know. So I wondered, to which, of course, my publisher told me very sternly that you do a third one and then we will bundle all three together and put it into a case and sell it, but we're not letting you recycle. So I personally think a relaunch, refresh would have worked, but they didn't see the logic of it. So.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's difficult to convince the publisher. So tell us a little bit about your publishing process. You said that you love the process of working with the Indian publishers and editors. And did you know them in advance? Because they came back to you in 6 hours. So what was that process of outreach, and what was the process of the editorial process with them?
No, I didn't know them, but by then I had been writing a lot of columns, so I guess the byline may have been known. But they were just sweet, maybe because it was the first one in that space, after which there were a lot more that came at that time. And by and large, I think editors have been very good to me. They've never been prescriptive. They have said to me that maybe you want to go in this direction, maybe you want to go in that direction. Sometimes I felt that they weren't beating the manuscript into what they call I discovered they call developmental editing, that they weren't doing enough developmental editing. But they were always available if you called and said, I'm really stuck with this, and should I do it like this, and should I do it like that? And so they were a sounding board for sure, all of them, and they've all moved around. So now the good part is that all the publishing houses have people that
reshuffled,
that I have worked with. I didn't have that much luck with copy editors, because I found that. So here's what I find. I find, for example, that if you are invited to write a blog for the FT or something, they'll do some little polishing of it. And that's what good editors even here do, that you can't even figure out, it's like a dentist who's doing a cosmetic smile. You can't figure out where he's changed it, but he's changed it, he or she. So that kind of editing I miss, because I see that with every time there is an overseas journal that does it's so nicely done that it lifts it sparkles. So yeah, I think here you're kind of a little bit left with smoking your own dope, especially if you're not good with deadlines, especially if it's all last minute. Then I think you suffer where they themselves don't have the time to do that. But no, I think that they've been pretty easygoing, as I think most good publishers should be, easygoing and supportive.
Yeah, I think sometimes the context also is very important, and the subject matter experts, editors assume that the subject matter expert knows their subject, and hence we should not
I think they do put it
do
out
the developmental shaping as you're talking about as much.
Yeah, they do put it out for review, for peer reviews. I do know, because I offer to review. I mean, when I'm asked, I do review a lot of them. So I guess they do put it out for review, but you're right, they don't do the developmental. But I think the copy editing, we could have a lot more sophisticated copy editing, because long sentences that get shorter. Sometimes copy editing changes, like I had one time for the academic book, copy editor who introduced words like thus and henceforth, and I'm like, I have never used thus and henceforth in my life. I mean, how can you do that to me? Or once I'd written a whole 3 pages, she'd say in other words, and I would think that if those words were clear, why do I have to do in other words? So yeah, so I think I would say push back. I mean, push back and say, no, this is not my voice. I mean, or they cut out all your jokes. It's a serious book. And I'm like, no, you can't cut my jokes out, because that's me. So you have to try harder.
And I think there is I mean, if we didn't let our voices come through, then every book would read and sound the same, right? It would
voices
be very
Yeah, on the newspaper side, there are some lovely editors, like one who told me that you have to edit from the top. It was Shekhar Gupta, actually. He said, you have to edit from the top, because he said that where you end is sometimes where you have to begin, the meat of the thing. And he spent so much time padding the first part, because you're not sure you'll get to 1,000 words, that if you have to edit, please edit from the top. Don't ever edit from the bottom. So yeah, you get good advice.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So tell me about the role of marketing as you see in publishing and putting your book out there. And are you very active digitally now that a lot of marketing happens through digital and social mediums? How do you think of marketing?
I think books have to create a buzz. And where will it create a buzz from? I think the thing with the digital space is that it picks up and creates a buzz. It amplifies a buzz that is already a buzz. I also find that every proponent of the digital space doesn't often tell you how the acquisition piece works. I mean, how do people actually see you and get to see you? And I pick up something because I'm seeing a recommendation or someone tells me to do it. So I would say that you still have to be a part of, you have to get reviewed in the newspapers. Now I'm finding a trend though, I've seen it and I was a little bit surprised, but I think people are doing it, where a lot of authors are writing a piece on their book And I thought, if you've done 20,000 words in the book, why are you doing a 1,000-word piece? But I think there's a trick there, as I've been reading it carefully and following it. I think to take some aspect of what you're doing and lift off from there and make it happen. I think I do like to do to create a television show around it, where, for example, you get other people to come in. And again, I have a friend, she used to do storyboard and things, Anuradha Sengupta, and she told me that you don't regurgitate the book, you lift off from the book. So if you've talked about young India in the book, you don't re-talk about it, but you get maybe someone from MTV or someone from somewhere else to talk about what their experience with young India is, and is it connecting with what the chapter in your book is saying. So it's a sort of tangential connect with your book, but a tangent, as we know in geometry, also has to make a point of contact with the circle at 90 degrees to the radius. So you have to figure that tangential connect out. So I think a lot of that would work better. And I'm quite interested with the idea of writing on your book, though I'm not sure how I would do it if my new ones ever come and see light of day. But I think I'm seeing a lot of people increasingly doing that. So if you get a page in a really leading place where you get 1,000 words to talk about your book in a way that is not a summary of the book, I think that could be quite interesting. And if other people refer to it, cite it, quote it, I think then the digital will do the fulfillment and pick it up and amplify it.
Yeah, I think the whole challenge is ensuring visibility in whichever way you get it.
Yes.
I mean, airports obviously have always been a fantastic place where people see books. And today, of course, digitally, there's a clutter. So how do you stand out? And the new mediums today tend to be a lot more visual and video, and definitely there is a space for
podcast it, to talk to people like that. But I think it's who else you collaborate with that will give the book the buzz. I think you just have to lift off other people's brands and whichever medium they are. So I'm not a purist. I will do it in any medium where it is possible to do. I have a friend who does absolutely stunning PowerPoint summaries of books, and it's just so cool. So I would probably beg him to do one of mine and get a large enough reader base. So yeah, I would do it any which way.
Yes. There's tribes and tribes, and you need to be a part of it.
It's still also very nice in a Diwali hamper. Some people send to me, you get 3 books in a Diwali hamper, and you're like,
oh, lovely.
What I lovely is this? Yeah, exactly. Lovely is just to feel good, lovely. So I think a little bit of that too.
So, Rama, a lot of our listeners and viewers today might be other professionals, especially women, because we do cater to women viewers and listeners. So, if they are looking at the idea of writing a book, and they are women in different careers, different professions, what would you advise them? How should they go about? Why should they write a book, and how should they go about doing it?
Be very clear why you're writing a book. Don't write it for the money. If you believe that it will enhance, if you're writing about your profession and it will enhance your professional worth in whatever form, then that is motivation enough. Then go for it, baby. Absolutely. If you want to write fiction and you want to take a shot at it, I think it's really easy in these times now as well to get yourself self-published. Get your voice out there. And if it's too daunting to write an entire book at one shot, start writing articles. I think if you write with regularity, get yourself a column, start writing articles. Every time you've done a presentation somewhere that you think is really good, translate that presentation into a Word document of some kind, so that you remember all the smart things you said that resonated. You remember the conversation in that room when you made that presentation. So in a sense, you're actually sponging off all that. And so then, hey, presto, you have a chapter already there, right? So if you are, if you're a lawyer and you have if you've had a really interesting case that you think is good and has a lesson to it, then start capturing your thoughts as and when they happen in whatever form. Capture them, electronic diary, whatever it is, just start capturing your thoughts and start putting thoughts out there, because I think a lot of people are so fussed about intellectual property that they don't discuss their ideas. you don't discuss their ideas, you won't get the buzz back that this is terrific, or they actually listened. I thought this was a pedestrian point, or I thought this was rocket science, and they push back so hard. So the more you put it out there, I don't think anybody can run away with your ideas. I mean, they may steal your words, but your ideas are yours. So once you have an idea, just put it out there, put it out there, put it out there, wherever you go, wherever you talk, whatever work you're doing, just bring them to the front. And I think that then causes the flood that you can then sit down and write is the easiest part. But don't hold it inside and say, if I put it out there, they will steal it. I don't think anybody will steal.
No, those are like great things to remember, if you're an aspiring author. So from Win Inspire, the whole idea is that it's a pay it forward movement. What can we do to inspire the next generation of women, girls, entrepreneurs and so on. So a large last message as we are ending, reaching the end of the segment today. So what would be some messages that you would give to the girls and the women in general as they are approaching life and seeking success?
So give you my mantras, they probably blow up in your face. They blow up in my face often enough. But I think one is seek to perform, not to belong. I think looking back, and I am a generation that kind of had it tougher, though the next gen tells me not necessarily. But I think when we spend time trying to belong in a boardroom, belong in a peer group, belong in a professional space, you tend to not perform. But if you focus on performing, I think belonging will automatically happen. I think that's one thing that I would say. The second is that you just have to continuously ask who made the rules anyway. I ask that all the time when people tell me, "Hamare khandan mein aise nahi hota hai, hamare industry mein nahi hota hai." Who made the rules? And often a lot of rules women think are made for some reason. It's actually just the majority community, that's men, making rules for themselves. And at the same way, the minority communities tend to get left out. So I think you have to ask who made the rules, and everybody will be looking at everybody else and saying who made the rules, right? So I think you have to ask that. I also think you have to sensitize people, because very often what looks like being anti-woman is actually people with retarded sensitivity or social skills. So I think you have to sensitize and say, it could be something as little. I mean, I sometimes wonder, why am I being so awful? But I found a set of minutes when Mr. So-and-so opined, Mr. So-and-so stated, Ms. Bijapurkar felt. Okay. And I'm like, why is he opining and stating, and why am I feeling? And it so happens that it was just one of those unconscious biases. And there are many such unconscious biases, or people who always say gentlemen, gentlemen, gentlemen to a room. And I'm saying that earlier it was not okay to say, no, talk to me. But now I'm saying, hey, listen, you can damn well say, ladies and gentlemen, it doesn't hurt you. And I'm sorry, you can't not do that. So I think to be able to sensitize them, it could be something even more major, something less, but sensitize them and try and seek an institutional solution to say, this is what I want going forward. So I think these are some of the things that I would say. And I think that very often we think we don't belong in places where we don't belong. And I think you just have to say, I mean, I still find it hard to go to the front of the room and sit down at the head table. Even if my nameplate is there, I don't do it. I can't. People think it's like, it's reverse pretentious. But maybe it's from ages of not being a natural at the head table, where people didn't want you there. I mean, not didn't want you there, but they didn't make room for you, if you know what I mean. They didn't make physical room, and they didn't make social room for you unless they knew you well. So you tend to think that discretion is a better part of valor. Let me backbench and I'll take it from there. So I think it's a little bit of that. But those are the between the who made the rules anyway and perform not belong, I think we're highly okay. And finally, just I have a poster in my one of my bookshelves. It has an elephant with butterfly ears, and it says, "Be yourself, the world will adjust." And I think the world does adjust. It's only a mother that doesn't adjust. Being a mother and a daughter, I will tell you, the rest of the world adjusts.
Fantastic, fantastic, Rama. Thank you so much. I think these are great stories for and great messages for our listeners to be inspired by and to take lessons from, as they're leading their own lives of defining themselves in whichever way they want.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amrita. As always, it's such a pleasure and good luck.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you to the listeners and bye.
Bye-bye.